Hello, this is Alexis, and today I'm gonna share some tips on how to ride backwards. I must admit that it took me about 2 months before getting comfortable going on a straight line backwards, and even longer to slowly turn. And today, because I also haven't been practicing consistently, I'm still slowly trying to master this skill. In any case, I would like to share with you a few tips. I'm going to break the tutorial into 5 main points. First is going to be how to mount and take the few steps backwards. Second, how to start going on a straight line backwards. Third, how to turn backwards. Fourth, how to go on a straight line backwards, but with the upper body facing backwards too, so you can see where you're going. And fifth, grasp an understanding of the pendulum. Just before starting, I need to clarify that it doesn't matter if it might take you days, weeks, or months. If you are really willing to learn this skill, just don't give up and go in there. And remember, every millimeter that you reach riding backwards, every centimeter, which will be every meter at some point, counts. So hang in there and stick to your practice and you'll get it. My choice was to take a bit longer, but keep the wheel safer. By learning on a public park in the grass, the terrain is not very leveled, so it might be a bit more difficult and it might take longer. By trying the wheel was dropping, I didn't want to risk to damage the wheel. In terms of settings, so hard, medium or soft, I use hard mode. I don't know how medium and soft would work because I simply don't use them. Also, I use power pads, and the backside especially, they're very wide, about 6 to 6.5 millimeters. They help me loads to get the grip to the wheel and wank it backwards so that I could then get momentum to reach the backward movement. In this demonstration, I'm using a Sherman Max. However, as I previously mentioned, power pads, wheel mode, and the type of wheel you have doesn't really matter. What really counts is how much practice you put in, which will eventually show results. Let's get started then. My first tip is put one foot on the wheel and the other one next to it and take a few steps backwards to start getting used to the movement. A bit like when we first started riding, instead of going backwards, we were going forward. So learning to mount and dismount one-footed can help incredibly. That's how I started going backwards. So mounting backwards and taking a series of steps, first with one foot, then with the other, just to get the muscle adjusted to this new movement and strengthen them, as well as the body that needs to adjust to this new level of equilibrium. Step 2. Once we are comfortable with one leg and one foot going backwards for even just a few centimeters, then we can safely mount backwards so we can start getting the other leg onto the pedal. Our very first time might just be a matter of a few millimeters backwards. It's still a great achievement. Once you have both of your feet on the unicycle and you are riding it backwards, try to increase progressively the number of millimeters, then centimeters, then meters that you are traveling backwards. A couple of tips that could help is to try and focalize what's in front of you, not what's on the ground. Another tip is trying to help to maintain the equilibrium by using your upper body, as well as trying to shuffle the wheel side to side, because on such low speeds, this type of training is not only difficult because it's a new way of traveling, but it's also difficult to keep upright. Once you master these steps, you should be able to go backwards more or less on a straight line. Now, on step 3, it's time to learn how to turn. Third point, turning backward. My way of turning backwards is similar to when I first started learning turning on a unicycle. I kept my internal leg fairly straight and my external leg bent. On top of that, I find it personally easier when doing figure 8, turning the shoulder on the opposite side. In that way, I can turn a bit more sharply. I haven't practiced enough to the point of being comfortable riding backwards the same way as I ride normally, but I'm getting there. I still need to practice as well in order to get better. 4th point, going backwards and turning the upper body, so one shoulder looking straight forward, so you don't have to ride blindly. This took me quite a few trials, and I still need to get a bit of practice on this as well. But what I found useful was to move one of my feet more backwards than the other, so that I had more control of the Sherman Max in this case, because it's quite heavy. It gave me a better sense of equilibrium when turning my upper body. Usually when I turn my upper body, I lean into a turn, but in this case, I need to be able to go straight. So by adjusting my foot position and getting my knees a bit more bent, I could also control a bit better the unicycle, and in concomitance with that, it would turn with my upper body as well. And I also found that it was easier to control it when I was looking backwards with my left shoulder than when I was looking backwards with my right.
Number 5, the pendulum, which describes the movement of the Euc back and forward continuously. I wouldn't suggest doing this for prolonged periods of time because it puts a lot of pressure on the motor.
So what I found is that the pendulum for me is still to date the hardest of all these skills to apply. What I did, I've tried to yank the Euc backwards, wiggling around, and then go forward. Because I already knew how to go in a straight line, I've started gradually going backwards, then forward from a long range
Distance.
Once I was getting more comfortable, I was slowly then trying to shorten the amount of time.
And distance.
I was yanking the Euc back and forward. I find that wiggling in it a bit helped me to keep the control, especially with such a big wheel. But again, that's also a matter of skill that I still haven't mastered. To help me to do that, I've tried different forces applied to my back pads. I tried to go really forceful, then I've tried a bit gentler. I've tried again different feet positioning, different upper body positioning. I've tried looking straight ahead instead of at the wheel. Slowly, with a lot of practice, it starts to become a bit easier to perform. But basically the pendulum is the movement of the Euc back and forward, ideally in a straight line, so that if you are waiting for a red light to turn green, if you have to be stationary and you don't want to dismount, you can use this technique and just rock forth and back without the need for dismounting. Just be aware again that this movement, this technique, puts a lot of pressure on the motor and it can overheat it a lot faster than it normally would. Another thing that could help if you see you're struggling a lot is try to move the power pads, if you are using them, a bit more backwards or a bit more forwards, a bit tighter, a bit less tight. Try different adjustments. Also try to take them off and see how different it feels, if it might be easier for you or not. Another consideration could be about foot positioning. Try putting your foot a bit more forward or a bit more backwards, a bit more rotated internally or a bit more rotated externally. So trying all these different techniques, then you can really check what can work better for you. And with these 4 main tips, I can conclude my tutorial on how to go backwards. This is what I did in order to learn the basics of going backwards. I still haven't mastered it myself, but my way of practicing, whenever the weather allows, is to try and dedicate 20-30 minutes almost every day to practice, slowly but surely. You might be asking yourself also, why would I bother learning how to ride backwards? If you're interested in off-roading, technical riding, jumping, it can be a very useful skill, because if you try a jump and you go up and then you realize you don't have enough torque and it's very steep, the wheel then will just go backwards. And if you don't have the core skills to control it, you will fall. So that can be useful in those scenarios. The same on a very steep incline, or also trying to learn how to control the wheel at these very low speeds can increase the level of control that we have of our EUC. So there can be quite few applications other than just a challenge with ourselves and the pleasure of learning something new. I hope it helps, and if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Ciao ciao!